A developed country like England, we shouldn't have 320,000 homeless people. It shouldn't be happening, should it, really?
These things do not discriminate. You know, it's not a certain social circle because it can happen to anybody.
Somebody who hasn't got a safety net, like a family or a steady job, or someone that has.
One emergency, one problem, can send your life spiraling downwards.
The preconceived ideas that everyone's going to be after money and they're on drugs and they smell and they're dirty and they deserve to be homeless, all of that stuff's nonsense.
I'll be honest with you, I walk past homeless people on the street in my 20s. You don't think it's going to be you, you think you're above that, and I'm guilty there, yeah, definitely.
In Birmingham, the number of street homeless people has increased by 53% in the last year and by 588% since 2012. At the last annual count, there were 91 people sleeping rough on the streets every night. Sleeping rough has severe consequences for a person's physical and mental health. A further 20,000 people are in temporary accommodation or sofa surfing with friends and family without any long-term alternative on the horizon. Birmingham City Council are receiving 600 new statutory homeless applications every month, and the number is growing. There are 12,900 on the housing waiting list. If the government is going to meet its target of zero rough sleepers by 2027, it's absolutely clear that more needs to be done.
I grew up in care from the age of 2 until I was 18. Didn't really settle in one place, didn't really manage to kind of build positive relationships with a family. Struggled at school because of that, because I kind of felt different, felt like the kid that didn't fit in. My first kind of real introduction, I'd say, to drugs was the foster parents that I lived with when I was around about 17. Their son was a drug dealer, and then that just kind of led on to using Class A drugs. So I was in a block of flats one day, somebody offered me some heroin. Within a few weeks of me kind of doing it for the first time, my life kind of spiralled that much and become that unmanageable, and the drugs took such a hold of me, and I ended up on the streets of Birmingham sleeping rough.
I had a job and it was a full-time job. I even did extra hours and overtime, but the problem was the company went bankrupt, so a lot of people were out of work. I decided to go into a warehouse, and that's when things went even worse, because the government has rolled out the 0-hour contract thing, and I had no idea what it was and how it worked. And it just hit me. I got a call from the agency saying, don't come into work until we call you. And it ended up being about 2 or 3 weeks. So that was 2 or 3 weeks without any money coming in. So I decided to go into Universal Credit. And again, Universal Credit takes about 4 or 5 weeks before you actually get any money. I couldn't pay rent. I was living through overdrafts. And after a while, I just couldn't afford to pay anything.
It came from working a low-paid job and just never getting ahead. I was just working out an awful lot of hours, 7 days a week a lot of the time for about a 5-year period. I mean, just surviving, literally on the breadline, surviving. A rent can almost be 2/3 or 3/4 of what you're earning a month, and that's, you've got to live, and if you've got a fun getting to work as well, transport and everything else, very hard. I referred myself through Washington courts, came in the homeless thing, slept the night on the floor in the lounge there, and got a room the next day after referral and assessment and everything else.
Young people are presenting as homeless all the time, and it's not a specific type of homelessness. Homelessness impacts young people in all different ways. Rents are very, very expensive, and as always are increasing. They're on a limited income, the national wage is not the same for them as it would be for you or I. They have to make a limited amount of money stretch for gas, for water, for electric.
At college, nobody knew I was homeless, or rather in supported accommodation. Depending on what time I'd start, I'd leave 2 hours early in order to walk there, and then I'd walk back. I was, spending money trying to figure out how on earth my mum would spend £20 and come back with like bags of shopping, and I would spend the same amount of money and come back with like 6, 7 items.
My sister was put into a forced marriage. The attempt was then made for the same to be done to me. That's when I decided to make a stand to say no, I don't want you to do that to me. and that was when I suffered the full extent of the domestic abuse. I kind of lied and said that I was taking the rubbish out, but actually in that black bag were my belongings, and I had to just literally open the front door, close it, and then the split second of somebody thinking you're putting rubbish in the bin, I had to run down to the bottom of the road. I went straight to a police station, and that evening I was taken to a domestic abuse hostel. I remember the manager opening the door and welcoming me in, taking me into her office and saying that you're safe and we will support you. I constantly asked, like, are they going to be able to get through the door? Are they going to be able to find me? And they were like, no, this place has got quite high security, so they're not going to be able to get to you. I remember going to the shop the next day, but with the hood of my coat over my head, and every time a car horn beeped, I thought it was somebody that had recognised me and that they were coming for me. But obviously that wasn't the case.
Having been homeless as a teen myself, I know that there's a huge amount of long-lasting effects, and that can be to do with mental health, it can be to do with the way that you trust services and other individuals.
I did suffer depression. I felt different to kind of everybody else. Waking up on the streets in a sleeping bag or in a car park, not having, you know, somewhere to go and have a wash or food in the cupboards or a bed to sleep in, or being around friends and family. All of that stuff, you know, was difficult.
All my school friends and other associates that I used to hang about with, I've lost all of them. Yeah, they sort of stepped away. They tried to reach out, but they didn't know what they were reaching out to. They didn't understand.
One young woman, early 20s, is sofa surfing, and she told me this guy put her up, and he sort of offered her alcohol and everything. And then one night, like 3 a.m, she got a tap on the shoulder. A lot of clients have told me they feel invisible. A lot of clients have told me that they've been very seriously abused by people, physically, sexually, emotionally, degraded and humiliated by people that don't understand their situation.
People would say, why don't you get a job? Why don't you sort your life out? You know, nobody really took the time to look at, you know, the reasons why I was in that position. It becomes more difficult then if you're homeless and you're trying to transition back into society, if you've not felt part of that society for such a long time, because people don't want to stop and talk to you, people don't want to have interaction, they want to turn their head and look the other way and act like you're not there and you don't exist.
We need to take time out to understand and support people who we do see on the street and not avoid them.
That person is a person with feelings. There's situations that person's gone through that you possibly couldn't imagine. They're not a bit of dirt in the street that you can step over. And
Rough sleeping is the most visual end of homelessness, but it's only a small part and a snapshot of the biggest issue. We've got people in temporary accommodation, families, people sofa surfing, and also we do know there's a huge population that are hidden homeless who haven't come forward and told us about their situation yet.
There's a large proportion of households who are homeless who are families. Because they are covered by statutory legislation, you might not see them on the streets because they're actually in temporary accommodation, but that's still not a home for them. They are still homeless.
We have over 2,700 families in temporary accommodation. That has a huge impact on the children in terms of their schooling, in terms of how distressing that can be for them. Birmingham City Council does build its own houses. We're the biggest council house builder in the country. However, it is not enough to meet the demand of the people. We need an additional 89,000 dwellings by 2031, and that's to accommodate the additional 150,000 people that will be moving to the city. But in addition to that, we need to make sure that we've got good supply at the moment to deal with the many people in temporary accommodation, and that's from hostels to properties to bed and breakfast.
If you've got no fixed abode, how are you going to apply for a job? How are you going to print out a CV? How are you going to build and maintain proper social networks? So as human beings that we all need to develop friendships, to develop a sense of confidence.
I've found living in temporary accommodation very, very degrading. You lose all your sort of dignity, and I like my independence, and I think you lose that greatly, you know.
Recently we've launched Barry Jackson Tower, which will be a temporary accommodation centre and was originally a tower block that was down for demolish. We've also got Magnolia House, and that will, in addition, those two properties will give us over 200 bed spaces so we can move people into those rather than using bed and breakfast. Due to austerity, it's been created a whole host of broken systems, and it's housing, it's support services, it's everything that relates to people, particularly who can be vulnerable. Locally, we're doing a lot to try and prevent homelessness, but ultimately we're sat in the middle of a crisis, so it doesn't feel like it's enough. The government are focusing on rough sleeping at the moment, but as far as I'm concerned, that's not enough. Rough sleeping's gone up by 164% since 2010, so this is a moral and system emergency. More needs to be done about prevention, and they need to invest in prevention. They need to be looking at their own policies that push people further and further into crisis.
St Basil's works with young people aged 16 to 25 throughout the West Midlands. We've got 34 residential projects, and I think over the last year we've helped more than 5,000 young people across Birmingham and the West Midlands.
Birmingham is leading on the region's Housing First programme. We've got 9.6 million for across the region.
Birmingham has chosen shelter to deliver the Housing First service. You get people into property, and then you actually then provide the services, wrap that around them, whether it be mental health services, substance misuse, whatever it is, whatever they need.
Jointly with the local authority, we put together a unique team that worked with other agencies such as the NHS and other charitable organisations to engage with that particular community. It was raised to me that there was a real issue around Mamba Spice, which is a drug.
A client of mine has told me it's cheaper than the cost of a pint of beer.
My take on that was actually the only way that I could address that was doing background work on the wider criminality that was bringing those drugs into the city. And that drive of enforcement has seen an 80% drop in Mamba attacks.
Education is everything, but realistic education, not just say no.
I am an outreach worker now, and I work in the homeless team at Change, Grow, Live, and I'm really passionate about my job. I think it's a fantastic opportunity for me to be able to give something back to society as well, and be able to help guys that are in a similar situation.
I help women and children that suffer domestic abuse. Where we work at Shelter Birmingham, we offer an in-house domestic abuse project. There's other organisations such as the council, there's Women's Aid.
Trident is an organisation that's been delivering housing, care and support for over 50 years. We accommodate women with children that are in need of emergency accommodation to keep themselves safe from harm. If you think that you know somebody that is experiencing domestic abuse, then don't be afraid to speak to them, because the person that you're asking will probably be really pleased that you did ask that question, and that might be the point that things change for them.
Change into Action is an alternative giving scheme. It allows people to access that money and funding, but it makes sure that it is targeting those that are genuinely homeless across the city.
You could have 10 organisations that work with a homeless guy in one day, and actually the thing that really stands out to them more than any of those organisations is somebody that walks past and takes 5 minutes to actually stand and talk to that person, you know, and ask them how their day is. When people used to actually stop and take the time to treat me like I was human, that would mean more to me than somebody giving me £100 on the street. I think it's about, you know, society in general all taking a bit of responsibility for some of this stuff, and looking at ways that, you know, all of us can do our own little part to try and tackle, you know, what is still a massive problem in homelessness.
There's also the street link. So if you see somebody that is sleeping rough that you're concerned about, then contact Street Link, and then they will get in touch with the outreach workers and the street intervention team that will go out and support that person, talk to them about what their options are, hopefully encourage them into accessing the services.
Before it escalates out of control and you find yourself on the street, I would try and get advice first. try and almost like have a backup plan.
What a lot of us tend to do is not ask because we're embarrassed, not realising that the help is actually there. You have to open up and be willing to learn through it rather than kind of like secluding yourself and going through it all alone.
Don't suffer in silence, because you will get that help and you will get that support. It's just that you've got to make that step, and that's probably one of the biggest steps that you're going to take, but it will be worth it and you will be free of everything that you're going through.